Today, we're joined by someone whose work has been quietly but powerfully woven into the visual language of global cinema and animation. Gonzalo Dias is a digital matte painter, background painter, and visual development artist whose career spans across major studios and critically acclaimed productions. He has contributed to projects for Netflix, Sony, Frame Store, Axis Studio, and more. With deep expertise in storytelling through environments and eye trained by years of feature film and animated series experience, his work blends artistry and atmosphere, often without a single line of dialogue. From detailed worlds to dreamlike landscapes, Gonzalo's brush helps bring narratives to life. And today we're going behind the curtain to hear how he does it, what he's learned, and how emerging creatives can grow in this space. Gonzalo Diaz, welcome to the Rocher Mentorship Podcast.
Hi,
Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good, thank you. And what about yourself?
I'm very well. I'm so excited to be speaking to you today. I'm really giddy. All
Yes, I'm
right,
very
so
excited
we're
as
just gonna
well.
all right, so we're just gonna get into it because there's so many people who are listening to us today. And I'll just start with the basics so that we understand you better. So can you tell us about yourself and how you got into being a digital matte painter?
Okay. So, I'm 26, I'm Portuguese, I live in Lisbon. I've always loved doing arts ever since I was a kid, so it always felt natural to follow that path. But before I like movies, I wanted to draw comic books, especially manga. That was my dream as a kid. But as I was growing up, movies took a special place in my heart. And it kept growing and growing and growing. And at a point, I was like, why don't I work on this? And then I did some research and talking with some friends and people that were in the industry. And slowly, I started to the dream of working in cinema and animation started growing. And I was like, yes, I'm gonna do this. I studied in fine arts in Lisbon. Nothing very
Mm-hmm.
cinema like. It was purely fine arts. And I was like, nah, this is not it. So after that, I did a more did a visual development course, like in Rome, in Italy. Unfortunately, because of COVID, couldn't be in person. And that's how I really fell in love with doing art for movies. First, I wanted to do visual development, concept art, and I still do that from time to time.
Okay.
And then the opportunity with DNEG arise, and they invited me to work with them as a matte painter. I had no idea what a matte painter did back then. They saw potential in me, and they took me in, and I moved to the UK. I moved to London back then, and I started working as a matte painter. It was a bit random, like I didn't know what was a matte painter back then, but I found out on the job. I was lucky enough for someone to believe in me and in my skills, and yeah, the rest is history, to be honest.
I have so many questions to ask about this mini story that you just told me, but I'll take it one by one. So, do you mind giving us like a because one of the things I like to do is ask how many years so that we're not pressured to expect too much. So, I would explain for young creatives like me, it seems like doing big things like you would take so many years. It seems like it's a long process that I would have to like work 10, 20 years. But it's always interesting sometimes when I hear that it's not like that for some people. And I just want to know, was it like that for you when from when you went to school and when you started like looking into the film industry and animation to landing your job at DNEG? How long did that take?
Didn't, so it took a long time for me to own my own skills. Like it was not like a snap of a finger. It did take a long time. Like from me when I started to drawing manga to me like being professionally prepared to work in the industry. I think it took around like 10, 11, 12 years like to own my own skills.
Wow.
So in that part it did take a lot of effort and consistent working, but I was still studying when I got my first job. I was on my second year of the idea academy. I was on master level one, and I had to drop out of school because suddenly now I had a job, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, why why would I say no to a job to keep studying if the goal of studying was to have a job, you know?
It's to get the job.
So in
Yeah.
that aspect, I put myself in a position where in the like the industry was there. I got this job in like a convention called TGU. Trojan Horse was a
Mm-hmm.
unicorn. It's a worldwide festival here in Portugal, where all the industry from animation, games, cinema is here, like live action animation, and it's like a more or less an exclusive festival. Like you pay a ticket, you go there. It's like a all week in Troia, which is like a very secluded area here near Lisbon, and you get
Mm-hmm.
interviews. You apply, you put your portfolio, and if they like you, they will call you for interview while you're there. And that's how I got my first interview ever. I don't think I would have been hired if it was not for the one-on-one contact that I had there, because I feel like for someone that doesn't have experience, to put yourself out there, to get known like as a person, not just as like a number on an email, because recruiters
Yeah.
receive thousands of emails every day, and you are just one more. And if you don't have
Yeah.
anything on your portfolio or curriculum that catches their attention, like experience, the best way for you to get a head start is to get yourself known physically. And you need to do networking, you need to go to these events to get yourself known, at least at the beginning. And that's how I feel like I got into in the industry. I put myself out there. I was in the right place at the right time as well for the right project, and yeah, that was pretty much it.
I'm going to ask you a follow up question about networking, right? What you said is so profound, especially when you are applying for jobs and you know that your CV, your resume is just going to be sifted into one corner and you never get back. But I want to ask you, aside going to events, what other networking opportunities should young creatives look towards, right? If somebody wants to work with you, for example,
Yeah,
how would
yeah.
we get your attention? What would we do? Where should we be at, and what would we do to be able to get jobs and get opportunities like yours?
I would say like do your research, know what you want. I would say for a junior, it's important for you to be a bit broad because I was not looking for a matte painting job. I did not know what that was, but I was open minded, even though it was not the thing that I was looking for or I knew of. I was open to try new things, and I was really keen on being successful, like in the industry, and I took this opportunity. And I think the best way if you want to work with me or anyone else would be like to build a network of people through events or online. For example, I've met people like in Annecy, which happens every year in France. I think that's a great way to connect with people. Trojan Horse was a unicorn is also a great way. And then, but these are big events. But then you have thousands of small events. Concept 101 in London, for example, when I was in London, I went a few times. It's amazing to know new people, meet either juniors, seniors, or Playground is in Germany, if I'm not mistaken, or that's also pretty good to to meet new people. So do your research, know which industry or which industries you want to go, and see what kind of events where the most people you can find in the same place you can find, and try and go. I know sometimes is because of you work another job and you don't have time. Maybe it's money wise because these events cost money. Like most of these events like are not
Yeah.
cheap, so it's also a bit money money heavy. So I understand that not everyone can do that, especially if you don't live in Europe. Because if you don't live in Europe or America, because in America there's also a lot of events, it's a bit harder to come to this because it's not just like a 50 euro ticket to like a country like 2 hours away. It's like Maybe if you live in Asia, like in Japan, it's like a 20-hour flight to come. So there's also a lot of events online. Like, for example, Trojan Horses Unicorn also has like an online event, which is gonna happen now in May, if I'm not mistaken, which is fully
Okay.
free. You can get a ticket like on their website, or you can get someone to give you a ticket, for example. Because if you have a ticket, you have one more to give for free, and you
Oh,
get
okay.
interviews, you get master classes, mentorships, and I think that's, for example, a way to go. It's not as efficient as like being there in person, because as I said, you are still online, there's still a barrier, like you are still just like someone else over the screen. The impact is not as big as like 101 in person. But if you can, for some reason you cannot afford to do a 101, this is a good example of something else that you could do, for example. So I would say like that,
Absolutely.
being on LinkedIn also helps. Doing collaborative projects, I feel like nowadays with the industry being in shambles as it is, collaborative projects is a way to meet new people as well. Like put your work out there, try and get some experience, even if it's for indie stuff. I'm doing some collaborative projects, some indie projects, pro bono projects in the meantime where I'm trying to find my next gig. So I think that's also very important to meet new people and build a network.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm gonna come back and we'll circle back about networking and the idea of mentorship. But I just want to understand better. You know, when you talked about getting your job, you said you didn't know anything about being a map painter. So I want you to talk to us. I'm gonna let you speak. Talk to us about what it is that you do, how you learned on the job, because this is the first time hearing that you didn't know how to do it, but you got into it and you're doing such fantastic work at it. So I'm gonna let you speak and teach us.
Yeah, that's a fair question. That's a fair question because especially nowadays, like the industry, it feels like you need to know to do the job that you are going to be hired for, and 10,000 other skills, and that's so frightening for juniors. And so even though I did not know what was matte painting, I had a vague idea. I knew, even though I didn't know exactly what would the job entail, I had my painting skills, and that's what they hired me for. They saw, oh, this person has never done matte painting, which involves Photoshop, Nuke, involves some knowledge of 3D, and I had some knowledge of 3D. I knew how to paint. I feel like they vibed with me as a person as well, and they saw potential in me and my skills, and they were looking for a junior. So they said,
Okay.
"Oh, this guy doesn't know the software," because the only thing I did not know about matte painting was how to use a 3D software, which was Nuke, and that was the only thing. Because I knew Photoshop, I knew how to paint, I knew how the to do all the hard stuff that the company cannot explain to like someone. But learning a software, it's something that can be done pretty fast, like, and especially if you are working on the job. And they bet on me. They bet that I was gonna be a good fit, and I turned out to be honest. Like, but the first few, I would say the first 1 2 months, like it was crazy because I did not know how to use Nuke, and I was fortunate enough that I was put in a project which was starting. So it was the good times at the beginning of a project where you still have some time, where you can do things more slowly and learn on the job. And it was just me and my supervisor. And basically, I had a private teacher for on Nimona when my first project was on Nimona, and me and my supervisor at the time, which is Eric Montero. I really loved him. We still like talk a lot. We have become friends after. He taught me how to use Nuke, and then the rest, it was just a matter of getting used to it. I think the first week he gave me a tutorial, and then the rest was like trial and error. And when the production picked up, I was already working fine alone. So yeah, I think I was a bit lucky in this aspect because the production allowed them to hire someone that did not have experience or knowledge of that software, and they could learn on the job. I feel like nowadays there's n- like, because of the crisis, like most companies are not willing to do that. So I
Yeah.
feel real lucky and privileged in that aspect that I was able to get that experience.
Hmm. Absolutely.
I also
That's
worked
a
a lot
very interesting.
to
No,
get
go
that.
on. You also worked.
I also worked a lot. It was not just like they gave me the opportunity, but I could have not worked
Yeah.
enough and not succeeded in like learning it on time and mastering my skills.
So if I'm going to take something from what you said, if you're given the chance, make sure that the people who gave you the chance don't regret it. Put in the work, grow in that space. I think that's something you really, really did. I mean, grow in that space. So I'm going to ask you about some of the projects that you've worked on. I know that
Yeah.
you've worked in major studios like where you currently work and Jellyfish Pictures on films like Nimona and Garfield. What was the most challenging but let's say rewarding project you've worked on and why?
I would say I will always have a special place for Nimona because it was my first project. And not just because it was my first project. I resonate so much with the story because I'm a queer person and it's a queer project and it's the first feature animation queer project that there is, to be honest. Because there's a few projects that there are some hints here and there of like a backstory, like a secondary character being queer, or maybe the main character being queer.
Sorry. Yeah.
1 second. I'm so sorry about this. So
Oh, thank you. Sorry.
I I feel like Nimona was and is a special project because I learned my craft and I resonate so much with the story and I love it visually because Nimona is so graphic but it's still 3D but it feels like so much 2D, and it was such a challenge to like try and make the matte painting match the 3D and being still be 2D feeling as well. And it was such a big project and there was not a lot of time at the end. And I remember like at the end of the production, it's being very like crunch time, but it was such a rewarding, and I was so happy when it went to the Oscars as a nominated. I was really proud of that, and I feel like it's such a beautiful, unique, and pure project, and I love that. To be honest, I think, yeah, for sure that was my favorite project and one of the most challenging because of technical like things.
Would you say that you grew on that project? And how long did it take? How long did it take for you to work on that?
Oh, for sure, I grew because, especially because it was my first project. I grew so much from the technical side, from painting side, because all my supervisors and people I was working with were so talented, and they had so many years of experience. So it was such like a good space to learn how to paint better, how to strive to be better, to do better, to try and be on the same level as these people. So it was the most fertile environment possible. And what was the other question? I'm so sorry.
I was asking how long it took. What was the time
Oh,
frame to work on
so
Nimona?
I started in January 2022, and it was until like September, October. So it was around 8 9 months on the
Oh,
project.
interesting. Interesting. So I'm going to ask you about your creative process, right?
Mm.
So I can see that your work is incredibly detailed and it's very immersive. What is your creative process like when designing a new film, a new environment, or background? How do you approach storytelling through your art?
I think the one of the first few questions that I ask myself when I'm creating a new piece, if it's for a movie, like usually they give you the reason for why you are doing that, because a movie you are doing like something for like a sequence or a shot, and there's a motivation and the story is already done. But for example, so you don't have to think of that too much. You have to understand it and try to maintain the goal and the message they want to pass. But for example, if I'm doing one for myself, I think the main question that I ask myself is, why am I doing this? What am I trying to
Okay.
transmit here? What is the message I want the public like to feel, or to try and understand from the illustration I'm trying to make? And from
Mm-hmm.
there, I try to be the most down to earth possible, and I try to
Mm-hmm.
make it as simple as straightforward for the public to try and understand the message, or even if it's not a message, the meaning, or the feeling that I want to transmit, because a lot of times there's no
Yeah.
message behind it. You want to transmit a feeling
Yeah.
behind the painting, with the lighting, with the composition, with the characters, with everything that surrounds it. So I think like that's, I think if I keep truth, like while I'm doing the piece, if I keep that first question and answer on my mind, I think like the illustration will transmit what I wanted to transmit.
Absolutely interesting. What would you say inspires you outside of animation? Because I know that when it comes to the idea of art, it relies heavily on inspiration,
Yeah.
right? So, what inspires you outside of animation and film? Are there like specific artists, books, or experiences that have influenced your artistic vision?
Okay. So because I studied fine arts, and I also took like lots of art history. Art history is something that influences me dearly. Like I love going to museums. I used to love going to museums in London because they were all free, or most of them free, and see masters of their crafts. And I take a lot of inspiration from the great masters. I also try and I think nature for me is something really big. I take so many photos of especially skies, because I'm a matte painter. I think this is like something that I picked up on the job, so I get inspiration for when I'm painting skies for movies or series. I take so many pictures. If I see a pretty sky, or a sky that there is a specific condition that is happening, or the light is specific way, I have a huge gallery on my phone of like pictures I've taken throughout the years, and I get a lot of inspiration from that. Nature itself as well, because that's where we come from. That's like, I feel like nature is the creator of all things. So I think it's totally makes total sense to take a lot of inspiration from it, because even in engineering, a lot of things that seem like so abstract, they appear like in nature, like in plants or in tree, in animals, like the ratio of the leaves, like the colors of the birds, and the feathers. So I think nature, skies, and the great masters are mostly what I take bigger influence from.
That's great. That's great. I'm gonna ask you, what's it like to work on a passion project? So I know you work on New Age. What's it like to give your time to a project like that?
Oh, it was so fun! I loved working on it. The style was great. I was a bit sad that I had to leave because I had so many projects on hand, because I was working on New Age.
Yeah.
I'm also directing and co-directing like my own short. I was supervising another short, and it's so fun to see that you don't need big studios to do projects. Like
Wow.
you need
Yeah.
big studios to get the money, because we need to survive. We cannot pay the bills and the rents with air, so we need somewhere the money comes from. But these
Yeah.
projects have so much passion that I feel like a lot of times it's missing from bigger projects and bigger studios. And you are working directly with the creators, and it's so fun and refreshing to see like young people like me and you, and like creating projects and being driven with stories. And yeah, it was really fun. I really enjoyed working on it, and you have a lot more freedom than big studios as well. You get to give inputs, like they are very usually they are very open with for feedback that comes from the artist, which usually it's not
Hmm.
the case in bigger productions. And I love to be able to contribute not only with just my art, with my ideas as well, and kind of being heard. And it's a lot more fluid in terms of process as well.
Interesting, interesting. So I'm going to ask you about the industry that we're in now, right? The animation and VFX industry has changed a lot over the years. I mean, from
Yeah.
when you probably got into it and where you are now, you know that it has changed a lot. What are some of the biggest shifts that you have noticed in how digital matte painting and background art are now approached today?
Um, I feel like matte painting is something that's, even though digital matte painting, it feels like it's something new. Why is it called matte painting? At the beginning, I did not know why it was called matte painting. But once I think I was bored at, I think I did not have work, so I sent a message, and I was in a meeting with my supervisor, and I asked him why is it called matte painting, and he worked at Disney when they had like their office in Paris back when it was 2D. And matte painting comes from the term of when they had to paint like in acrylic or glass with gouache, and then they would stack the layers on top of each other like old Disney and Pixar. And that's why it's called matte,
Mm-hmm.
because it's matte. The paint is matte on top of a transparent surface. And
Oh, wow.
and I think like it's very funny that they kept the same name, because the logic is the same even though it's digital, but the logic is the same. You are doing like matte matte layers of digital painting on top of like transparency, with transparency, and then like it being stacked, it creates the illusion of space and the parallax and everything. And I think it's really interesting how they adapted the old style of doing matte painting to the new ones, especially because even within matte painting there's several types. There's matte painting that is more like this, that you paint on Photoshop and then you stack it on top. And then you also have something called digimatte, which a lot of 3D studios also use, which is more like VFX, because matte painting in VFX is different than matte painting in animation, because VFX
Oh,
is
wow.
mostly like using 3D models and projecting textures on top and generating textures and doing photo bashing. And animation, there's some types of matte painting in animation that are a bit more similar, especially if they don't want too much of like a stylized and 2D feeling, because the more 2D, the more you can do with matte painting. The less 2D, like the more 3D they want. You need matte painting to kind of imitate the 3D renders, which a lot of the times is just like textures projection. It's a lot of technical work. There's not so much like painterly work. And I think these are like some of the main differences from like matte painting, like from the beginning, like when it was 2D and it was hand painted, to like digital, and then like you have the most technical parts, like with projections and camera mappings and a lot of stuff, technical stuff.
Based on what you just said now, I'm going to follow up and ask you that given the rise of remote work and global collaborations and emerging technologies, what skills do you think will be the most essential for artists who are trying to break into the industry in the next 5 years?
I think skills. I think owning your technical skills is important, and I feel like a lot of artists do that, because most of the artists, what they try to do is they try to master their craft, whatever craft it is. If it's like painting, if it's rigging, if it's 3D modeling, if it's FX, if it's compositing, whatever it is. I feel like trying to own soft skills is also very important, because a lot of the times the best projects I had was not just because my colleagues were the best in the area, because probably they were, but because their soft skills also translated with being great in teamwork. I feel like a lot of the times artists are seen as lonely creatures, but in the industry, we are not alone. We are in a department. And even on the department, we have to collaborate with other departments. So, develop teamwork, rely on other people. Not wanting to do everything by yourself is also very important. Try and be the most resourceful as possible. Try and not to trying to have like an open mind for new ideas. Be open to criticism and to give being given notes. Receiving notes is a big part of the job, because most of the times it's gonna be like you do something, you show your supervisor, he gives you notes, you address them, and you think, oh, this is quite simple, but sometimes it's not that simple, because a lot of artists like sometimes it's hard for myself to hear notes, because well, I'm like, oh, why didn't I see this at first? But then I'm like, oh, my supervisor is like has like 30 years of experience, it's normal that he noticed something that I didn't notice, that I only have like 3 or 4 years of experience. So being open to like change things, because when you're working in production, it's not your, even though it's your work, it's not your work, it's the company work. So you cannot be defensive or kind of territorial with that type of work, because you are being paid to be doing some like the company's work, you know. So being open to feedback, teamwork, knowing how to listen, knowing when to talk. Like I would say, like even though in bigger studios it's harder to give your own inputs of like, oh, I think this would be nice. Knowing how to do that is still important, because even though it's harder,
Yeah.
big studios like proactive people. I think being proactive is very important, because studios will recognize that you are most, if it's a good studio and if it has like a healthy environment, they will recognize your effort. So I would say like soft skills, other than owning your technical skills, owning your soft skills is very important for the industry. And if you
I'm
are
just
like a
going to ask.
likable person,
I'm just going to ask. Um, I love that you covered soft skills, because conversations like this are really not hard. It's always learn this, learn this, learn that skill. But having those soft skills would help you in the work environment, and that's so important. But I also want to ask, what exact technical skills? So I'm asking for sort of like a roadmap to becoming a map painter. What technical skills must I have in my pocket to be able to land jobs and have the role as a
okay.
map painter in 2025?
So to be a matte painter, every time someone asks me, "Oh, Gonçalo, I'm trying to see if I can get into matte painting," and my main advices are learn your painting skills, because painting is a big part of the job. Learn color theory, composition, brushwork, three dimensionality, all those technical skills in terms of painting. I think it's very important, and I think it's what takes the longest for you to get to a good point. Then Photoshop is a must, because most of the times they'll ask you to know how to use Photoshop, because you can learn on doing this in several programs. You can use it. You can use Krita. You can use Clip Studio Paint. You can use Procreate, but studios will ask for Photoshop most of the time. So knowing Photoshop
Okay,
is very important. And then the
absolutely.
hardest thing that I think is to learn alone is Nuke, because Nuke is a 2.5 uh, um, compositing software, and it's used mostly for comp. But because matte painting is used to put 2D images behind the 3D world, we need this software so we can place our paintings in 3D cards and separate them, and then with the camera and place them in the right place behind the 3D, and then when the camera create a parallax. So learning Nuke is like the, I think, what most people need to learn, because most people who know how to use Photoshop will have
Mm-hmm.
pretty good painting skills, but knowing how to use Nuke
Yeah.
is what's going to separate probably a studio from hiring you from not hiring you. Because a lot of times my supervisors complain that, oh, we have so many good painters, but none of them have like good Nuke knowledge. So that's like that puts you a step behind instead of putting you a step ahead. So
I heard.
because it's hard to find someone that is good in technical stuff like Nuke and creative stuff like painting. So like having both the technical part of being able to use Nuke properly and being proficient on it and being proficient in painting, it's the hardest part. And I think it's my biggest advice if you want to be a good matte painter is to own both of those skills.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will follow up since we're talking about what to do and what not to do. As someone who has likely mentored and worked with junior artists, what are some of the common mistakes that you see beginners make, and those mistakes you believe are holding them from advancing in their careers?
In which aspect?
So basically, in digital painting, or even in the film in the animation industry.
Okay. So I feel like, especially something that's portfolio wise, I think juniors try and put, because they don't have a lot of work, because they are juniors, which is normal, or
Okay.
they have a lot of work and their websites they are so confusing. I think having a simple website which shows your work the fastest possible is one of the mistakes that rookies make, because they want to compartmentalize everything, put everything in like a folder, like, oh, this is props, this is effects, this is characters, this is this is and that. And then for like a recruiter to see all your work, they have to click in so many different folders inside your website. And usually
Yeah.
recruiters, they look like 20, 30 seconds, and if nothing
Yeah.
grabs their attention, they are just gonna move next. So I
Yeah.
think my an advice that I give to people that are starting is make your website as simple as possible. Even if everything is more or less just like scroll down, and make make the best your best pieces the first ones so it can pop. And also, but don't always make the best ones on top, but then don't make like mediocre like work for the rest. Try and make like separate. And if you are not sure about a piece, maybe you shouldn't put it there. If you are not sure, it's probably
Yeah.
because you are not fully convinced and it's not your best work. So if you are confused if you should put something because you are not sure if it's good enough, probably it's because it's not good enough, you know. So try and be selective with what you put. Try and put it
Absolutely.
as
Yeah.
straightforward in a website or wherever you have like a art station, Instagram, and make it as simple as possible for art directors and recruiters to see the juice of your work and why they should hire you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with you. If you could go back in time, right, and give advice to the 18-year-old Gonzalo, who was just starting out, what would it be?
Um, I would say probably I think I would be further along if I hadn't studied what I studied, like fine arts. But that's not
Oh,
fully
wow.
just on me, you know. If I had gone more straightforward into like an animation school, because I feel like when I entered the industry, I was good in 2D, but I had gaps in my 3D knowledge. In like even if
Okay.
I don't work with the pipeline, it's very important for you to like as an artist to know the pipeline. Even if you are not a rigger or a texture, it's important that you know all those steps exist and in which time frames they are. And I feel like I had to learn a lot talking with my colleagues back then. Like basically I was like, I would meet a new colleague and I was like, oh, what do you do? And he'll tell me, and I was like, oh, I don't know what that means because I never heard of it because I had no previous knowledge of pipeline. So I would say if I had gone earlier into this, it might have make my progress faster and straightforward. But I don't regret going there to fine arts because I learn other stuff that I wouldn't know nowadays.
Yeah.
But I think that's what I would
Yeah.
say to me back then is trying, instead of going this route, go this other like more straightforward into the industry.
You know, you said something that reminded me of a question. Would you agree that getting a traditional degree or being self-taught, which do you think is like the easiest way to get into the industry and make sure that your skills are perfect? Do you think that going to get a degree
Mhm.
or learning on your own, which do you think is faster? Which do you think is better?
I think there's like because there's types. I don't think a degree will get you a job in the industry because you may have like, because in Portugal, for example, is from 1 to 20 a degree. Imagine that you have a 20,
Okay.
but then your portfolio doesn't reflect that because a lot of times grades don't reflect directly your portfolio. That's
Okay. Yeah.
the only thing like my degree served me was when I moved to the UK for visa purposes. Because if you have a degree,
Okay.
it will help you get more points to get a visa. Because the UK because of Brexit, I wasn't I wasn't able to just work there. I had to get a ride.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a degree like a bachelor is good for that if you want, if you are planning on immigrating to a new country and trying to get a job abroad, especially if you need a visa. So in that aspect, it helps you, but not to own properly your skills. I would say nowadays the best way to own your skills is not just to or either a degree or being self-taught. I think you always need to learn for yourself because a degree or any type of course you need to put the effort on your own. But there's
Yeah.
so many like academies, like for example, Idea Academy. It's not a degree. It's like an Italian art academy that is focused on VizDev, and like the teachers are professionals of the area because most of my teachers back at university, none of them had ever worked other than just being a teacher, or some of them maybe there were some gallery artists but had no real job experience.
From experience.
So
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I think like trying to go to a course where the teachers are working or have worked and they have connects in the industry is a possible way to go, but usually these courses are a bit more expensive than degrees. So I would recommend that if you have the financial possibility for that, to go to one of those degrees like ID Academy, like FZD, like in Singapore. And there's a few other courses that are good here and there, like Lightbox Academy in Madrid. Um so I would say like if you can, like those type of degrees are better than bachelors in terms of like technical
Yeah.
knowledge. So if I had to, if you don't just want to be self-taught, I would recommend to go to one of those type of degrees where the teachers know what they're doing, have worked on it, have tons of experience, and they're just not t- talking about theory and like
Yeah.
abstract theories.
Absolutely. 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 I agree with you. Absolutely. I'm gonna ask my last question. If somebody wants to go into your footsteps or follow your footsteps, I think the best way to just put this question is your last words for us. What should we focus on right now to improve our chances of success for young creatives? And for creatives who are in underrepresented countries and communities where
Mm.
the access that you might have might not be available to us, what extra work, what extra labor do we need to put in to be able to fast track our career growth?
That's quite hard because unfortunately like life is like where you are based, it's not controlled by you, because
Yeah.
if you are unfortunately enough to be in a country where, for example, imagine that you want a job in the UK or in America or anywhere in Europe, but if you are in a country that needs a visa to get there, sometimes it's out of your reach. Like it's purely bureaucratic stuff. Because I left the UK because I had to get a visa, and it was such a bothersome to get a visa every 6 months, every
Mm,
year,
mm,
and then you have to pay a lot of taxes on no one else needs to pay that works and resides there. It's so much harder for me to get jobs there because I'm always on the bottom of any sort of list because they have to pay so much more for me to be there, and then
yeah.
restrictions, and then you are far away from home, you don't have your support, and you don't know. Like, imagine when I went to the UK, my first salary, I said yes without thinking twice because I was like, oh my god, that's a lot of money, and then I got there, it's basically the minimum salary, and then you
Mm,
struggle. So I would say I don't have like a proper advice in this type of things. Is try and find yourself like legal counsel. Imagine that you know that you really want to work in Australia or in the UK
yeah.
or whatever you want to work. Is try and find someone that knows about legislation and visas, and try and ask how is the process and if you can do anything to improve your chances of getting there. But end of the day, in the UK, for example, I would not be able to live there right now because I don't have a job. It's
Mm,
my visa is solely is fully tied to me having a job. And if I lost a job in the UK, I would lose immediately my right to rent, my right for healthcare. I would need to leave the country in I would say like in 60 days. I could stay there like
mm,
as a tourist longer, but I could not do anything that I was doing. So it's a tough world for people that need to move countries. Like I felt it, even though I'm from within Europe, which is a bit more privileged in a lot of aspects. But I
mm-hmm.
felt it. I felt how immigration affects someone because you are always nervous of losing your job,
Yeah.
because it's not about just losing a job and you can apply for example unemployment, because if I was in the UK I could not apply for unemployment. They were just kicking my ass away back to my country, and it's tough, it's hard.
Yeah.
And I would say like inform yourselves before you move anywhere else. Inform of your rights, inform of the type of visas, have some knowledge of how the juridical system works, of how the system works, so you don't go there and you are like, oh, I don't know how anything works and I'm lost and I'm afraid of doing anything wrong. So I would say like try and prepare yourself as best as you can, even though sometimes these type of things are not fully are not easy to find, or are like in a very like bureaucratic language. I would say like try and find someone that can help you manage and navigate through this type of paperwork. But I guess it's try and be the best prepared as possible.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that.
Of
What would
course.
you, what does future hold for you? Are you working on any new projects? Anything you would tell us?
So right now I'm in between projects. I moved back to Portugal. I was
Okay.
living in the UK. I moved back to Portugal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to build my career here as a freelance for abroad or for Portugal, depending if there's work coming. I'm working
Mm-hmm.
on a lot of projects, small projects. I'm developing my own project. In the meantime, I'm having some freelances here and there, but the industry is it's in a rough spot right now, and a lot of people are looking for jobs right now, and that's where I'm at, unfortunately. But I feel like I'm seeing more and more jobs on LinkedIn and coming, and my friends that are working, they tell me, oh, we have this new project or this new project. So I'm optimistic that in the future, like things are gonna go well. And it's as
Yeah.
any other industry, like there's ups, there's downs. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess it's a
Seasons.
matter of powering through it as best as one can,
Yeah.
even if it means getting
Yeah.
a side job. There's no shame, because I feel a lot of people feel like they are giving up on getting a side job. No, if you don't have work for a
Hmm.
year, you are not just gonna be looking into to the ceiling. You need to pay bills.
Hmm.
Like, it's no shame to,
Yeah.
like, if you need some time, if you need the job right now and you cannot get one in the industry, get a job in the meantime. But my advice is never, if you are really passionate about it, never give up. Keep looking
Hmm.
for it, keep grinding. There is so many other things other than just studio work, doing personal projects, doing collaborative projects. It's also a way of, imagine that you are doing like a side job, having like a personal
Yeah.
project, or working with other people. It keeps you occupied. It doesn't let you fall into despair. So I think right now that's my best advice for anyone that is also looking for a job as me. Keep yourself occupied with a personal project or collaborative project in the meantime until you find a job.
Absolutely. That's such solid advice. I like the fact that you need to be doing something, regardless of whether you have the opportunity you want right now or not. This has been such an amazing conversation, Gonzalo. I've learned so much in the space of like 50 minutes. I'm so grateful that you came on board to talk to us today. There are so many people who are going to listen to these resources and get their careers, get their dream jobs, and we owe that to you. Thank you so much for getting on this call with us today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
I wish you all the best in your new endeavors. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.
All right, guys. So we have come to the end of another episode. We have so much planned for you this week and next week and in the coming days. So make sure to look at all our live channels for informations and check out our latest resources. We have new blog posts up that you can read and learn and position yourself to get mentors across different industries. Until we see again, I'm your host, Apike Afolabi. Bye.